Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. I am your host, Umpire James, and happy to have you listening. I recognize a few names: Emanuele Davalli from Italy. Let's see, the Ghost I was just talking to this week. Sorry, I don't recognize any others. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to make a comment, go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll invite you to the stage and make a comment. So today we're going to talk about unit stats and also fog of war, specifically screenshots. Now, coincidentally or ironically, I had scheduled to talk about this 2 weeks ago, and um, when I went to church, and then on the way home, I was preparing to what I was going to say, and then and then I saw a video about unit stats that Marshall had hosted, and I thought that he had just stolen my idea and made his own podcast episode. Um, and so I was a little bit mad because I was planning to run it myself, and then he just went and did it. But it turns out there was nothing malicious in it. He completely on his own thought about talking about the same topic, and just happened to be doing it on the exact same day I was going to. So it was really funny, actually. And so if you'll look, those you can watch his podcast. He had Jan with him. It'll be really good. So I won't. He said a lot of things that I agree with, and so I'm not going to belabor it and reiterate it too much. But I will share my own 2 cents and my own perspective, a little bit different from maybe him and Jan. And then and I'll also talk about fog of war. So let's get into it. So unit stats. Why are we talking about it? So it's one of the main, I guess, things you need to think about as you are creating your own rule set to play Kriegsspiel. And there's a lot of rule sets out there. There's the historical ones, and then within the Kriegsspiel community, basically every umpire has their own rule set because I think we're all the same. We're not happy with anything someone else made, and often not even happy with what we've made. We're always tweaking and improving rules, and that's fine. And so, like myself, I think I've made, I don't know, 15, maybe 10 official rule sets and 15 others. I've made a lot of rule sets for different settings, and it's one of the things I actually enjoy is trying to make rule sets that are simple enough that they're easy to run and remember, but get the meat of what the setting and the period is, so that it simulates realism. So it's fun. So when you are an umpire and you're making rules, one of the main things you need to think about is what stats or statistics or attributes are you going to track for your units. Because in Kriegsspiel you have your little infantry block, and you got your cavalry block and your artillery block, and they move in. How fast do they move? What impacts their movement? And then they run into the enemy, and they start fighting with the enemy. I'm just moving stuff around for the fun of it, but we'll throw in some smoke for the fighting. So they're fighting with the enemy here. The enemy's shooting back, and how do you determine how well they do, and what do you track to determine when do they break, when do they run, when do they win and succeed, and what are you going to track to do that? And there's a lot of different ways to do that, and so I'm going to talk about the different ways, and then maybe what I think is best, or what I would suggest. So historically, and Jan spoke about this in his conversation with Marshall. Historically, in the original Kriegsspiels, they tracked things like hit points, ammo, morale, movement speeds, and disruption as different stats that different versions tracked. Um, Other things that can be tracked. So Jan in his discussion said if he had to pick one stat that mattered most, it'd probably be combat effectiveness, which I think is a good catch-all for a lot of different things. So I would agree with him that if you had to pick one, that would be it. You can track strength or hit points. Morale is another thing to track. Supply, things other than ammo, ammunition, and maybe fatigue, cohesion or disruption, and then speed. So those are all things you can track on a unit. Um, but you don't want to track all of it. So one of the pitfalls when you're making a system is the desire for realism, and you think it gets better when you track every little thing. So, like on Damon's units here, for example, you can track manpower, morale, and ammo, and you can change what these are. But there's three things you could track here. So if you really wanted to, you could every round you do combat. You could say, oh, okay, they just shot for 15 minutes, so that goes from 9 to 8, and oh, they're getting shot at, so their manpower goes down from 9 to 8. Um, and then maybe because they're losing casualties, their morale is down. So you could track all three, and with Damon's units, of course, it's got the nice tracker on here that's easier. You could also, maybe you were tracking fatigue, so that's a, so you say, okay, they're at one fatigue level, and then you're tracking. Let's see what else I got on here I can add. Ammo, there we go. So now they're low on ammo. You got a little ammo marker there. So you can throw all these little markers on there and track all sorts of different things. And there's a temptation to do that. But everything you track. Hold on one sec. I've got a kid. No, I don't want that. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back. What? I'm recording. What do you need?
Mom said that we have to play a game.
Okay, let me finish this. I need 20 minutes, and then we can do that. Okay? I'm recording for people, so sorry about that. Okay, so where was I? So if you can track all sorts of different things, but it actually takes away from the game because you get so much in the weeds, and it becomes so much work on the umpire that it takes forever to resolve. It's less fun for the umpire, less fun for the player, especially if it's a live game and they're waiting on you to resolve. So in a lot of cases, less is more. And so you want to drill down to what's the most important thing and try to track as little as possible while still getting that realism. So I had asked Glorious Ruse and a few others, for what their thoughts are, and of course Glorious Ruse has always got very good, very interesting and good thoughts. We don't always agree, but I like his thoughts. So I'm reading from what he wrote and kind of summarizing. He said, it matters what era you're representing and the scale. The nice thing about black powder is a lot of things are very uniform. So people are moving around the same speed, ranges. Musket ranges are roughly the same, so you don't have to take into account unit range, unit speed as separate from each other. In World War II, it gets much more complicated because ranges. There's a lot of differences between like a Sherman and a Tiger or a Spitfire and an ME-109, so you have to take that into account. But in black powder, it's a lot easier. Um, and so he talked about. Sorry, I'm reading through real quick. You want to take into account strength of a unit. So I mentioned strength or manpower. Um, so if they're taking casualties, how that's impacted, and then what? And then he said the best thing would be cohesion. Um, and I'm probably butchering what he probably would want me to say. So I'm going to read what he said word for word. Um, So he said there's cohesion, which is different. He sees it as different from morale. An elite, victorious old guard regiment is still going to get scattered to hell and back after a charge, And in the American Civil War, lines had a bad habit of dissolving into uncontrollable skirmish lines in the middle of a firefight. That doesn't mean either of those units are breaking or low in spirits, but it does mean effective command and control is much harder, especially for bold actions. And so he differentiates, sometimes we track morale, which is kind of an indication of how close a unit is to breaking or routing. But he's saying there's a difference between that you can be low in cohesion and high in morale, which means they're going to stand and fight a lot longer, but they're not, you can't control them as well just because they've lost that cohesion. So that's one thing he recommends. Let me go back. No one's raising their hand yet. Um, what do I do? So my most basic system um, is, and I just revised it. I just changed it to a D8 system, which I'm playtesting, but so far I like it. So I basically track one main thing and then one secondary thing. And before I called it disruption, now I'm calling it morale. And basically every unit starts with a morale level. Um, and so as a unit fights, it goes down in morale, which is the opposite of what Rouge just said to do, but that's why we're different. So I have these morales. You can start at implacable to confident to steady to shaky to wavering, then broken and shattered and surrendered to all the different states. And so as a unit fights, it'll start at one morale level, and as it takes disruption hits based on the dice roll and the conditions, it'll go down that level until it breaks. And then once it breaks, it goes to safety or off the field. So that's how I do it. I basically have one thing that I'm tracking, and that's it. I don't track ammo. I'm not tracking. What were some of the other things I said you could track? Uh, you could say morale is the opposite of disruption. So maybe I'm tracking disruption. I'm not tracking cohesion, which Ruse would say is dumb, and I should track it, but I'm trying to keep it simple and fast. Um, I'm not tracking even casualties on the minimum level. So when a unit breaks in my rules, then I start tracking casualties. I give it a casualty marker, and that has a big impact. But what I say is, as it's going down, in black powder warfare, casualties are usually pretty minimal, unless a unit is getting chewed up as it's breaking or surrounded and whatnot. So I basically say unless it has already broken, I'm not going to worry about what the casualties are. And then once it breaks, then I will, and I track that, and that has an effect on the dice roll. So, and that's basically it. So morale and then casualties is all I track. Now I have had games where I do track ammo, but it is, like I said, it is another thing, and um, it's hard to remember, and so usually I don't, and I just kind of play it by ear whether ammo matters or not. And I usually assume if there's supply wagons nearby. Let's see, where's some wagons? Oh, there's a nice wagon. Second hand wagon. So if there's wagons nearby, then I say, okay, there's people running ammo back and forth. I don't have to worry about it. That's my system in a nutshell. That's what I care about. Um, Now I know Ruse's system. He does track, like he says, he tracks strength, so casualties, and then he tracks cohesion. And they're two different stats. He rolls dice twice to see how both are affected. And so his system, I would actually argue, I've I don't think I've run a game with it, but I've seen it and I've read through his rules, and I actually think his system is more realistic and better. With one caveat, it takes longer because you're rolling for every unit. You're rolling two different things that you have to do and think about. And so Ruse's games are great, and his rule system's good because it's all play by post, and so he can take his time um, and think through it, do all the dice rolls he wants, however long it takes. It takes. My and this is why my system's different and in its own ways better, is because it's so simple that it works for live play. So if you got two units shooting at each other, each unit gets its own dice. You just roll like that. You see what the numbers are. One disrupt each, And so whatever disruption it was at, you just go up one, and it's super fast. So you can go through combat really quickly. You're done. People aren't waiting a long time for a game to get resolved. So while it's not perfect, its simplicity and speed is a bonus. Um, let's see. Do I have anything else to say about that? I think that's mostly it. Marshall covered pretty well. I guess the last thing I'll reiterate is whatever stats you track, you want to keep it simple, and don't overdo it. Especially if you're initially creating rules, start out simple and go from there. And I think I'll leave it at that. So next question is screenshots and what to show. So I don't like this map. I'm going to do a different map for this point. What's a good one? We'll do this one. Chickamauga. So there's someone had asked a question or raised a point as a topic of, what's the right amount of screenshot to share? And every umpire varies on what they think is reasonable. So um, I'm doing Chickamauga, which is notoriously terrible for views because it's mostly forest. And so if you're a commander, let's say you're Bragg and you're on this road and you are here, what screenshot do you show as an umpire? Now, if he were really there, and I actually just visited Chickamauga, and so which was kind of cool. So if he was really there on that road, realistically, he would probably see a little bit into the trees, a little bit of the men formed up there, and like a little bit behind them down the road. You get some kind of screenshot like this, which is super tiny. And there's not much to go off of. Now you can do that as an umpire. It's frustrating for a player, but part of being a good umpire is giving enough information for your players to make semi-informed decisions that impact the game. And so I've played in games where the screenshots are small to this level, and then I also got very little written updates. And so basically, I had no information to go off of, and so I couldn't make any decisions. Or if I did make a decision, it was a complete guess. I'm like, well, I don't know what's going on. I order my men to move forward, and who knows what's going on. It's no fun because you're not. Basically, it doesn't matter whether you play or not. You're just choosing something and going with it. So you want to give your players information enough that they can make decisions and think about what makes the right sense. Now, obviously, the other extreme of what I just showed, there's that, and then there's you could show the whole map here, and that's obviously realistic. It's like Bragg has a satellite view of what's going on and um, can see perfectly the whole battlefield. That doesn't make any sense either. And this isn't fun either because if he can see all of his own units and all of the enemy units, then there's no fog of war. It's basically like any other tabletop war game, and that's not Kriegsspiel. So there's somewhere in the middle between those two that's fun and optimum. And so what's my personal rule of thumb is, let's say Bragg was here and he moved up to this road and now he's speaking with Walker, right? So if I were Bragg's umpire, I would give him some kind of screenshot that one showed where he was. So he's just with those cavalry units in that clearing. He went up this road, and then I'd probably show. Again, he's in a forest, so it's not great for view, but I would probably show maybe something like this. And that's still pretty limited, but less so. And so he can see where he came from. That those cavalry units are still there, and then he kind of has an idea of what's there. He has the gist of there's infantry in the trees arrayed in line. There's some artillery in the field up there. So there's a bit more information, and then he can talk to Walker, and maybe Walker, because this is Walker's division. Let's say Walker's been walking his line, and including the front, so he can see all the way through Kelly's field, and then he can see well over to his allies' lines and maybe over there, something like this. So he can see. I guess he's got these 4 regiments. Yeah, he can see most or all his command if he's been walking the line, and out to Kelly's field to know that there's nothing there, and then a little bit of his allies, so he'll have more information. And it does depend where they've been and what they've been doing. If Walker, I don't know, if he was with this regiment and specifically wanted to lead them from the front in a bayonet charge, then I would limit his view as a result of that, because he's not spending the last 20 minutes leading his men and getting reports. He's directly there, so then a screenshot would be very small like that. But if for his turn he's just kind of sitting there taking in reports, he may not be able to physically see 300 or 400 yards into the trees, but maybe he's getting reports from, I guess it's just in his men. Um, and so the screenshot represents not just what he actually sees, but also the kind of information that he would know by virtue of where he's at, like reports from aides. Maybe he can hear the men, so you'd be showing something like that. Um, the other piece is the more you show in a screenshot, the less you have to describe in either written or verbally in their update. And so there's a balance there. And so if you have smaller screenshots, it's the onus is on the umpire to describe more what's going on. Um, and if you do larger screenshots, you can save yourself time and have to describe less. So I usually err on the side of larger screenshots because I'm running so many games with so many players that I, rather than write paragraphs, long descriptions of what's going on, I do larger screenshots and then smaller descriptions just to save time. But some of the better games have been, if the umpire has time, you give a more realistic sized screenshot and then you take a lot of time giving updates. And so, like one game that just ended, that the Gobbler was running. Oops, I did not mean to open that. His screenshots I'd say were more on the realistic side, but then he took a lot of time and care writing out uh, reports coming in from different sub commanders, and it made it more realistic. It was cooler that way, but there's a lot of work on his end. So that's just what that is. So let me see if I've said everything I want to say about screenshots and Fog of War. Now, obviously, so that's civil war in the middle of a forest. Let's do something more nicer. Let's do Austerlitz. So European battlefield, a lot more open. You're not surrounded by trees or mountains or anything. Well, there are some hills and whatnot. But so what would I do in a situation like this? So you've got, let's find a commander. All right, here we'll do Lannes Fifth Corps. So he's holding the left flank of the French here in the north. Let me. So what would he see? Your Lannes, your commander, like at the edge of his line or in the middle of his line. He's got cavalry to his left, infantry to his right. The enemy's in front of him. Oh, looks like he launched an attack. So let's scale this out. So this cavalry attack up here is about a kilometer away. It looks like some units got captured. We've got infantry coming in over there. Again, they're a kilometer away. We've got cavalry lined up behind them. So how far do you show? We got artillery shooting at them from 2 kilometers away on that hill over there, and then infantry arrayed. More artillery over here. We've got some stuff going on here. So you do, in a case like this, you do want to have your screenshots conform to terrain a little bit. And maybe this place isn't a great example. So, for example, there's this grove of trees right here and a hill right here. So one thing you could do is not show beyond those trees because of where they're at. So let's see. If I was doing his screenshot, I might do something like this. So it shows kind of the edge of the enemy on the hill to the east, it shows some of the fighting to the north, but not everything. And then you got this hill here that would block view that way, something like this. So this isn't perfect, but it conveys a lot of information, but doesn't give everything. So he knows there's artillery firing at him from over here to the east, and the enemy's arrayed over there, but he can't see everything because they're far away. He can see some of the fighting to the north, but not all, and then things to the south, and then like to the trees over there limit his view. Now let's do someone else that's their point of view is more limited. So let's say we took Constantine, and he decided to perch himself on this nice hill right in the center of everything. How much should he be able to see? I might reward him for sitting there and actually show him, because he's on this Pratzen Heights right here, and I might show him, even 3 kilometers out from that nice point of view because he's up on the hill. So that screenshot might look something like this. Let's see, because he's on a hill. Let's see, I might do, I don't know, this might be a little bit too much, but something like this. So, reward him for sitting on the hill with being able to see a whole lot of what's going on. Now, conversely, let's say Duktarov was leading this cavalry attack right in here well, it already went in, but he's leading this cavalry attack personally. Well, in that case, he's not going to be getting a lot of information. He's not on a hill, so I might just show him, something like that, a lot more limited, because he's leading a unit directly. Now, let me see if I can find an example of being limited by terrain. What you can see. Okay, this one's interesting. All right, so let's take Francis II, Holy Roman Emperor. Let's say he's right here at this crossroads for some reason. Now, it's in the middle of a valley. You can see, if you can read this map, there's a hill here. I'll mark it. So there's this hill here. There's this ridge line here, another hill here, some trees and a hill here. So he's basically at the bottom. And if you want to be realistic on how the terrain affects what he can view, then his screenshot might be something like this. So he's very limited by being at the bottom of the valley. So his view might look something like that, because you can't see on the other side of hills, you can't see through forests. So I try to be realistic in what a person can see to an extent based on where they're at, and reward people if they say, hey, I'm in this crossroads now, it sucks. I want to go on top of this hill to overview the battle. Then I reward that with a larger screenshot because they would be able to see more. And then you have to think about what makes sense from what they can see versus reports they're getting from units. So let's say, all right, Van Damme here, 4th Corps. He's in the middle of these gardens right here. So realistically, if he's someone sitting right there, I think these are trees, I don't think they'd be able to actually see much. They got the infantry lines over here. So if it's realistic, his screenshot might be like this. But he can hear the artillery behind him that he knows is his. He can maybe see and sometimes hear or get reports from the infantry in front of him. And he can hear the enemy artillery up there. And maybe, he was coming down into here. So even though realistically that view might be limited, I would probably give him something like, maybe this. If he's getting front lines or reports from his front line that the enemy is, half a kilometer to the east, then I would portray that, even though maybe he wouldn't be able to see them. And this is enough to do information with. You know where the enemy is, but not their full strength. Like, you don't see all the way. I'm not giving him this where he can see like a kilometer deep into the enemy ranks. So he knows the enemy front line, but can't see past that necessarily. So he has some information, but not all, and so he has to make decisions with limited information. But hopefully it's enough to make those informed decisions. All right, I feel like I've reached the point of rambling. I've run out of things to say. Anyone want to raise their hands and make any comments? I'll give a second. Doesn't look like it. Okay. Well, for those who watched and listened, thank you for doing that. Those who are watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. Hopefully, you got something out of it. Put comments in the comments if you agree or disagree with me, or also have any other topics you want to be addressed. Thank you for listening and have a good day or night.